Paul Joseph Goebbels, now known as just Joseph Goebbels, was born on the 29th of October 1897 in the borough of Reit, Mönchengladbach, Germany, to his Catholic parents Katharina and Fritz, along with his 5 siblings, Clara, Konrad, Hans, Elizabeth, and Maria. Young Joseph definitely wasn't born into wealth, with his father working as a bookkeeper at the United Wick factories, earning an annual salary of 4,000 marks. Despite his sophisticated manner, he was never too far from trouble. When Joseph was still a teenager, he was caught sending romantic letters to his older brother's girlfriend. After Hans Goebbels discovered this truth, he threatened to cut his younger brother's throat with a razor. From there, time flew. His parents provided him with a high school education and also helped support him during the 5 years of his undergraduate studies. Fast forward to the outbreak of the First World War. A young Goebbels was left disappointed after his application to enlist in the German army was rejected. This was due to Joseph's club foot, which was a swelling of the foot, presumably a result of having contracted polio as a child, which left his leg deformed. He also suffered from lung problems. Unfortunately, the closest Goebbels would get to the front lines would be all he could see and hear from his house in western Germany, whilst his older brothers, Konrad and Hans, were sent away to fight. Both men survived, and would in turn join the Nazi Party in its later years. Joseph would spend the rest of his career attempting to compensate for his inability to take part in the Great War. This wouldn't stop him, as one day he would eclipse any achievements he could have dreamed of, becoming Minister of Propaganda and even Chancellor of the Third Reich. After graduating from Heidelberg University in 1922 with a doctorate in German philology, Goebbels pursued literary, dramatic, and journalistic efforts, writing an expressionist novel in diary form in the 1920s. He continued for several years to try to become a published author. His diaries, which he began in 1923 and continued for the rest of his life, provided an outlet for his desire to write. The lack of income from his literary works — he wrote 2 plays in 1923, neither of which sold — forced him to take employment as a caller on the stock exchange and as a bank clerk in Cologne, a job he detested. He was dismissed from the bank in August 1923 and returned to write. Although not yet involved in politics, Goebbels, in common with most of his contemporaries, was imbued with a nationalistic fervor made more intense by the frustrating outcome of the war. During his university days, a friend also introduced him to socialist and communist ideas. Anti-bourgeois from his youth, Goebbels remained so, despite his later upper-crust affectations. On the other hand, initially he was not anti-Semitic. The high school teachers he valued most were Jews, and he was at one time engaged to a half-Jewish girl. As a young man, his options remained wide open as he contemplated political involvement. Indeed, it was an accident that determined the party he was to join. In the autumn of 1924, Goebbels made friends with a group of National Socialists. A gifted speaker, he became the district administrator of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. In November 1926, Hitler appointed him district leader in Berlin. The NSDAP, or Nazi Party, had been founded and developed in Bavaria, and up to that time, there had been practically no party organization in Berlin, the German capital. In 1932, Goebbels commissioned the publication of a pamphlet of his family tree to refute the rumors that his grandmother was of Jewish ancestry, which would be a recurring task for Joseph. Goebbels proceeded to build Nazi strength in Berlin until Hitler's accession to power in January 1933. After the Nazis seized power, Goebbels took control of the national propaganda machinery. In this capacity, he controlled, besides propaganda as such, the press, radio, theater, films, literature, music, and the fine arts. In May 1933, he was instrumental in the burning of un-German books at the Opera House in Berlin. The era of extreme Jewish intellectualism is at an end, Goebbels triumphantly told the crowd. A month earlier, Hitler had commanded him to organize a boycott of Jewish businesses, which he would complete. However, it wasn't all success for the German, as Joseph displayed little interest in regulating music and art, and had also failed in successfully regulating high schools. Goebbels' influence decreased in the years 1937 and 1938. During this time, he also became involved in a love affair with a Czechoslovakian film star that nearly caused him to give up his career and family. Regarding Joseph's family, he had 5 daughters and 1 son, all born in the mid to late 1930s. Goebbels' mastery of propaganda was particularly apparent after Germany's defeats in Stalingrad and Africa. Goebbels did not falsify the facts of the prevailing situation. On the contrary, the main thrust of his propaganda, which he carried on personally and without respite in the press and over the radio, was to continually raise hopes by citing historical parallels and making other comparisons, by conjuring up allegedly immutable laws of history, or even, as a last resort, by referring to some secret miracle weapons. His public appearances, in sharp contrast to those of many other prominent Nazis who had retreated to bunkers and fortifications, did much to improve an image that had until then been overwhelmingly negative. Goebbels' work was especially effective in intensifying the efforts of the home front. He became the protagonist of total war. After several false starts, the attempted assassination of Hitler on July 20th, 1944, brought him within view of his goal. On August 25th, he became Reich Plenipotentiary for total war. But it was, as he shortly lamented, too late. Following the looming German defeat in the Second World War during April of 1945, Adolf Hitler would commit suicide, alongside his wife Eva Braun. Many Nazi officials would do the same if not captured, especially those in the bunker. Joseph Goebbels, now the Chancellor of the Third Reich, was no exception. One day after Hitler had killed himself, Goebbels would follow suit. However, he didn't just take his own life. His wife and 6 young children's lives were also taken. Joseph Goebbels' story ends on May 1st, 1945, at the age of 47. Thank you for watching this Everything History video. We hope you learned a thing or two. What historical figure would you like us to cover next? If you've made it to the end, please consider subscribing. Maybe you'll stick around